Day two of the nationwide strike declared by the organized labor over the new national minimum wage.
All right, the strike started on Monday and paralyzed economic activities in almost every part of the country. And the federal government is, of course, still appealing to the organized labor to return to the negotiating table and in the interest of the country. And of course, we saw that, the outcome of the meeting with the SGF yesterday.
Yes, expecting that everything will be fruitful, hopefully before even the end of the day. It is in the studio to speak further on the minimum wage. Joining us now is Titi Lokbe and Nifowoshe, lawyer, development consultant, and active Nigerian citizen.
Yes.
Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for joining us. So let's quickly start off from where the two parties, left off. There was a meeting yesterday night, and both parties have come to some sort of agreement. What do you make of the agreement?
Well, I think we're getting there. It's reasonable, and I must extend my gratitude, appreciation, and commendation to the federal government for, taking that swift action of sitting with them. And I actually do not think it's two-party, because it's a tripartite committee, not just the Labour Congress now, the Labour Congress and then the private sector and the government. So it's not just the NLC, TUC and the federal government alone, but the NLC, TUC, private sector and the federal government, including, of course, representative of state governments across all geopolitical zones.
So what do you mean, if you take a look at the tickers of the agreement? One, the federal government says it is still committed to doing much more than 60,000 naira minimum wage, and the second ticker is for the organized labor to go back to the negotiating table. And of course the labor says, okay, we've heard the president, we will go back and meet. What do you make of all that? Does it give hope?
Well, first of all,
the strike will be called off. First
of all, I think we need to be emphatic. Not just 60,000 naira, but a 100% increase. 60,000 naira indicates a 100% increase, addition, 60,000 naira plus. So I think that if the NLC and the TUC are indeed for the Nigerian people, one would see that the shutdown that happened yesterday is affecting the Nigerian masses more than even the politicians, quote and unquote, that they seem to be making a statement to. Because think about it. If there was no power supply for over how many hours, and then the people who can afford to fuel their generator would go on with it without being affected. There was a shutdown on airports. Who are the people who make use of that? You and I, the average Nigerian. So I think that it's not just a starting point, but I think that that meeting yesterday evening should indicate the readiness and the empathetic angle of the government to say, yes, we hear you, yes, we see you, you can go back and let's see let's meet at the middle, not just for the government, but for the people. We should also remember that this negotiation is not just for civil servants, because, I mean, what's the percentage of those who are employed under civil service today? They're not even up to half of the totality of Nigerians who are employed under the private sector. So I think that if TUC, NLC are really for the Nigerian people, they need to,
pad it down.
Yes, a little, and, be more pragmatic and realistic with what their demands.
Some are saying that when you look at these entire negotiations, to also need a buy-in from the subnationals, to get, because, when the discussions were on, in previous, discussions, you see the subnationals saying they can pay this, they can pay that. Are we likely to get everybody to the table?
Okay, so it's important for us to note that at this table, we aren't just having the federal government. We have representatives. I mean, the governor of Osun State, Governor Adeleke, is representing governors from Southwest. And also, and then governors from other states are also representing governors across the geopolitical zone. Let's also remember that issues of national minimum wage is currently on the exclusive legislative list of the Constitution. What it means is that, yes, not just what happened pre-1959 when Awolowo, kick-started the whole concept of minimum wage for the western region of Nigeria. But right now we can't do it alone. It's about everybody. And of course, we also need to remember that when we're talking about national minimum wage, we aren't saying 60,000 naira or 35,000 naira or 30,000 is what somebody is going to get. It's a gauge to ensure that everybody, I mean, the people at the lowest cadre are incorporated in the system. So when we say 35,000 naira or 60,000 naira plus, it doesn't mean that a level 16 or level 12 or level 13 officer is receiving that specific amount of money. We also, so one thing I also think that we aren't talking about is the total embodiment of what the Nigerian government is doing. The 1 trillion student loan, the palliative, that's
the credit fund.
Yes, the credit fund, the palliative, the health insurance for staff on the civil service, and so many other things. So it's not just about that costing, it's about ensuring that the average Nigerian, whether a civil servant, level 1, 2, 3, or anybody in the private sector, is able to live conveniently. So it's not just minimum wage.
You know, the issue is, sorry, Fisayo, please, don't let me.
no, she you know, it's very important. She was just talking about the fact that, yes, it is, you know, the 60,000 plus, it's graduated upwards, is that you don't fall below anywhere, which is, you know, sharing news. But let's look at the interaction between government and labor.
Okay.
Over the years, has it been very healthy? Has it been, you know, like government said, it's not about me against you. It's supposed to be, we're working together to get to an objective. How would you rate it? Are we moving forward in this, or is it a side of the divide and, you know, a face-off all the time? Okay,
so first of all, the concept of negotiations between the government and the Labour Congress is statutory. Yeah, by the current law, the National Minimum Wage Act, there ought to be a review every 5 years. We started this last year when the president did the inauguration. And on the table, we have NLC, we have TUC, we have representative of the small and medium scale, we have governors representing each geopolitical zone. Now, that, in my opinion, showcases one thing. One, a recognition of statutory provisions, one, by the government. Two, readiness to work with what is tenable. So I think that by the action of the government, it is healthy, considering that it's coming after a stipulation of the law. Yeah. On the part of the NLC, of course, they're supposed to be the voice of the labor, and they're supposed to be able to impute measures to get the attention of the government. Whether or not these measures or these actions of them or inactions of them is commensurate with what they are receiving at the other end, I do not think it's commensurate. Considering the fact that you started with a negotiation, you came with 1,000+% increase. 1,000+% increase. Let me take you back a little. In 2018, the previous, it was 18,000 naira to 30,000 naira. That's about how many percent? And then now you want to go from 30,000 naira to, assuming without considering, 490-something thousand naira.
But you are a development consultant and economist. You also know that the indices, economic indices, have also changed. A small tuber of yam is now selling for 5,000 naira, but it wasn't so in 2018 when the minimum wage was 18,000 naira.
Indeed.
Yes. So things have changed. You know. So it's no longer, not even by 100%. Prices have soared, not just by 100%, but some even more than, 250%, some even, much more.
Yes, I agree with you, but we also need to look at it from the angle of personnel cost. Okay, in May, there was a removal of fuel subsidy. If we compare that removal of subsidy, of course, we had issues with the increase in cost of living and what have you. But let's be realistic here. With this increase, we also have to look at it from the angle of personnel costs. Because between 2018 and 2022, there was an increase in personnel costs, of course, of the government, from 1.3 trillion to 1.8 trillion. Yeah. So now let's bring it to now including the 60,000 naira. And also we also need to remember that it's not just an increase in salary alone. We're also looking at it at infusing initiatives, policies that would give that will ameliorate the hardship of not just the civil servants, but all of Nigeria at once. Okay, when the subsidy was removed, the government has been actively across, not just the federal government, now state government have been actively involved in the transmission from petrol
to CNG,
CNG across, and from Kwara, for example. And we recently just launched one, a station where they're bringing in cars and buses for conversion.
Do you know how much it is to come from Ilorin to Abuja by road? It's more than 50,000 naira.
Yes.
You know by how many percentage is that? And I think that, I don't know, Fisayo, because I think that, and this is not my opinion,
okay.
It's the opinion of some, those, we interacted with. They think that if, for instance, prior to the removal of the fuel subsidy, the CNG buses, were put out, were rolled out, across the country, that would have helped to, address the issue of transportation costs. If, for instance, the issue of, food crops, was addressed, that would address the issue of high cost of food items at the moment. Now, these are things that have been done after the fuel subsidy was removed. And we know that after this fuel subsidy was removed, everything went up.
Yes.
And Nigeria started feeling every pinch of, the hike in prices of commodities and services and all that. So what do you think at this juncture?
Yeah.
What do you think that Labour should or could do now that we know, okay, everybody is saying government cannot carry, the load because of the high personnel costs and everything. So what should Labour do at this juncture?
Okay. I'm going to start from what I know, not what I think. That already at this point in time, there are initiatives, both monetary and non-monetary incentives that the government currently has on board. And I'm going to reel out some of them. Yes. Okay, 100 billion naira for the procurement of CNG fueled buses and CNG conversion kits.
We agree.
Good. 125 billion naira conditional grants and financial inclusion for small and medium scales. 25,000 naira each to be shared to 15 million households for 3 months. 185 billion palliatives to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy. 200 billion naira to support the cultivation of hectares of land to boost food production.
Yes, these are.
I'm not done.
No, you don't. We are aware. We are pressmen.
Yeah, but I may have to dig the back of my house because it's concrete. So that I can plant. The way it's going, the cost of yam these days. But let's move, away from that. We've seen, the discussions. The Minister of Information, Minister of State for Labour and Employment, and representatives of the labour unions talking to us yesterday night, and we also played it back this morning. Where are you expecting things to be today?
Yes, okay, that's what I said. What should they do?
I emphasize, or I hope that the Labour Congress will show goodwill by putting a hold on the shutdown. 1. 2, I also hope that the NLC, the TUC, would also be reasonable with meeting the government at the middle.
What would you consider the middle? Government had said 60, but Labour
government
said,
so 60 plus, 60,000 naira plus.
So we don't know what the plus is.
Yes, we don't know what the plus is.
So what would you consider?
In law, we say consideration needs not be adequate but sufficient. And then, of course, we also have the moderate coordinator, but you can't give what you don't have. We do not want a repeat of history, where about 35% of Nigerian states could not pay their workers that 30,000 wage. We do not want a repeat of. And then I also, want to express my commendation on the fact that there was no deceit on the part of the government. It would have been, I mean, a different situation if the government say, okay, you want to shut down the company, okay, no problem, we'll do it. And then at the end of the day, they start bringing justifications as to,
But that's what's discussing. But that's the posture that is, triggering this strike? Because
Not a
government...
posture, but a sense of distrust on the part of NLC TUC. A sense of distrust, not a posture. Because if it's a posture, the meeting they had overnight would not have occurred if it's a posture. So I think it's just a question of lack of distrust. And I believe that when you see somebody walking towards something, yeah, I think you should be able to, be reasonable, even though you have an hindsight or an history of not trusting. But when you see the actions, you should be able to, move towards it. So I believe that we're getting there. I also know as a fact that minimum wage is not charity. It's not largesse. It's not a gift. It's supposed to be an anchor for what is considerably reasonable for the lowest. So when we look at it, we have to also think about consequential increase. When you say 60,000 naira plus, it means that the person who is on the deputy director, the director, let's multiply it and how much. And then it's not, they also have allowances and what have you. And as much as possible, I'm trying not to sound too caustic because I am an employer of labor. I own filling stations and I have staffs over 25. And thinking about it now, if we go on with this increase, I would have to increase the cost of my service as well. It also means that schools would have to increase the cost of their services. It also means that at the end of the day, God forbid us turn into Zimbabwe, where we probably be having millions of naira. So you want to buy something that is supposed to cost this, and because it has a ripple effect across the economy. And we have to think about inflation as well. It's beautiful to count this money, talk about these figures, but what is the effect of these figures on the average Nigerian when you want to service your car, for example, and you usually pay maybe fatai, about 5,000 naira, and then because everything is on the high, you now have to pay fatai, maybe 40,000 naira or something. There was a time when we used to buy sweet for 5 naira. Today, if you don't have 100 naira, you may not even be able to buy sweets. That is the effect of what? Inflation.
Some say that it could also mean that the NLC and TUC have little negotiating power and do not know, probably, someone suggested, yesterday I was watching an analyst that they could do with, by hiring someone who could, do better negotiation with the federal government. And I'm wondering, could that be a reason why, we're not making any headway?
Well, you see, there's a thin line between activism and, you can be an activist, but you have to be pragmatic with your activism. And I think that is the balance between experience. Economic experience, economic knowledge is different from just solidarity. And of course, there is also a thin line between humanity, charity, and reasonability. So we need to understand that even though we think that, the politicians, the Nigerian government, they have so much money in their coffers, we have to be realistic. When you say budget, for example, let's use Ekiti State as an example. I'm not from Ekiti, but let's use Ekiti State as an example. Ekiti State employs about 1% of their citizens in the civil service. Assuming, let's just assume and not concede that we now agree to these bogus hundreds of thousands and what have you, with the budget, it will mean that states across Nigeria may have to dedicate about 90% of their budget paying salary.
I remember that I asked you this question about the buying of the subnationals when we started.
Yeah.
And just moving away from there, you mentioned something very interesting, and that is talking about the figures in terms of people who are employed. And the people who are employed directly by government are not up to even a third of people in the private sector.
Yes.
Now, getting the private sector to comply will be another issue. You can shut down government offices, but you can't. It will be difficult for you to, picket private institutions. How do you, looking at them coming to the table, what were the things that they raised, and are we sure that this will cascade through the private sector?
They already gave their own thoughts. Before Monday, they communicated their acceptance of that 60,000 naira. They communicated their acceptance. Let's not also forget that it's not just medium and small scale employers alone. We also have Manufacturers Association of Nigeria within that committee. And of course, you know that in the private sector, it's about buying and selling, what pays me and what doesn't pay me. And that's what I was also, talking about, the implication of this. The implication of this bogus costing would also have a huge reflection on the cost of goods and services, because I am in business to make profit. And you want me to pay, for example, when we say this minimum wage in the private sector, I'm looking at it from the angle of level 1 to level 3, which is the cleaners, the security, and what have you. Okay, it's okay, 60,000 naira plus. It means that the guy with, say, 2-3 years experience, I'll probably be paying the person about 300 and something thousand naira. That would mean that I have to increase. That means that my running cost has increased. Where do I put that on? The services I'm delivering to you. So it means that if I was charging you about 10 naira before the increase, it would have to increase to probably 15-20 naira across board. And that's why I went back to the issue of us buying sweet for 10 naira before, and now we buy sweet for 100 naira.
So I need to take something else for my haircut this evening.
Most probably.
Okay, let's quickly look at, because I just have someone said to me that's the appeal to organized labor by the federal government, and part of it reads that the minimum wage is not only for public sector workers, it will be binding on the private sector as well. Yeah. This reality must be factored into the negotiation. So it hasn't yet been factored. It's going to be factored into the negotiations. And second, and the other issue is that Labour's current proposal of 494,000 naira is an increase of 1.5%, 1,547% on the existing wage. And it translates into a bill of 9.5 trillion naira for federal government alone. The fear now from government is such a wage bill could cripple the Nigerian economy by leading to massive job losses, especially in the private sector.
True.
Is that possible?
I agree with you. I remember when the subsidy was removed, I had to have a meeting with my team across our filling stations to say, what do you think is reasonable for us to pay? Because think about it, that then we're buying a truck of PMS for 8 million, and then it changed to about 20 million naira. And then it did not mean that the cost of running the station reduced. So we're still, it also meant that the cost of diesel increased. The cost of every other thing increased. At the end of the day, what happened? We have to start looking at ways to reduce manpower. Because the price increased, the running cost increased, but nothing is reducing. So that is a typical example of what might happen if we do not have a reasonable minimum wage. Jobs will be lost.
But even if we do a 60 plus,
yeah,
like you said earlier on, even at 30, some subnationals have not been able to pay. And then we go up 60 plus. We're still going to suffer similar consequences.
Well, that is where we now start looking at diversifying our economy. That is where we have to start looking at state governments not just relying on the handouts they get from federal government. That is how we start looking at alternative means. Today, even in the Minimum Wage Act, there are some exceptions. I think Section 3 sub 4 gave exception to some of the industries that are not bound by this minimum wage. And agriculture is one of it. Well, we may be looking far away from that, but I think it's a reality check for not just me and you, but for everyone, including NLC, to now look at productivity level. Of course, some people may not like it, but from Kwara, where I came from, for example, I think 2 years ago, there was some sort of biometric on civil servants, and you don't want to know the population of ghost workers we had in the civil service in Kwara State. So I think that while NLC is all out for the people, I think it's also time for the state government to now be more realistic with how they will be more productive and how the civil service will also be more productive. So it's not just enough to have this number of people in employment. We need to see results. I, for example, I'm even a fan of hourly wage.
You've really, given us insight into these negotiations and the path for the future in terms of government-labor relations and also what it will mean for government. Thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. That has been Good Morning Nigeria. Trust you enjoyed it. Do join us tomorrow for another edition. I'm Fisayo Ogunfuyi.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Atubazak. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.